Well, thank you very much. That's quite a beginning, and I got a rose, which is great. I've never had that ever happen before. Which is when you do something for 33 years, and I've taught over the world, to get something for the first time. That's very innovative and original, and I appreciate it. And actually everything, I think this is one of the most unique. I've never been introduced by a robot. At NASA, I drove robots. I wasn't supposed to, but management wasn't in the room, and I couldn't, I had to do that. One of the things I'd say is, first of all, it's my honor and my pleasure to be here in Kerala and to be here with the PMI chapter. I've been at NASA. I retired at NASA after 33 years. I was appointed to head up and to create a program project management initiative, which became the NASA Academy for Programs and Projects. And the first thing I did within the first 3 months was have NASA become very strongly partnered with the Project Management Institute. I'll explain that as my presentation goes. Would it be better if I stand here? Or? Okay. What you really have started doing today is really a key part of my theme. So you get it. It's about people. It's about taking care of your people. The strength around the world of the Project Management Institute is its volunteers. I've always been amazed, and I've always said this, that it didn't matter where I was in the world. I could be in Perth, Australia, or I could be at Kennedy Space Center at NASA, and I would get a call from the local chapter an hour and a half away, and so we have an evening event, and I didn't care if it was 20 people or 200 people. I like to show up because those are the people that are the backbone not only of the Project Management Institute, but frankly of the organizations that are involved in the most important work in the world. Because the consistency that I've seen since 1990 is when NASA said set up a Project Management Academy. Traveled all over the world. The consistency that I've always seen is the passion, the dedication, the seriousness, the commitment to learning and improvement from the program project community, from engineers, from business people. And so you should give yourselves a round of applause because it's about you. And that's going to be my message. I'm going to say it over and over again. You get it. I speak to, I would say about 70% of the organizations I speak to don't get it. It's a different kind of a framework. You honored a whole number of people today. That's important because it's about basically people stepping up and doing things. I'm going to go to the next chart, and the next slide is I'm going to show you a video. Because the thing that I want you to remember is what's encapsulated into this video that'll run for about 50 seconds. Because to me, the essence of programs and projects is captured in this period of time. And we're very hardworking, we're very dedicated, we're sometimes very logical people. And sometimes we, I think, miscommunicate the essence of the challenges, the complexity, but also ultimately the human nature of what makes us special and what makes projects special. So if I'm going to go to the next slide, and if we can then start this presentation, I'd like you to watch it and think, what does this tell you about project management and your work and your career?
Things are looking good. Coming up on entry. Vehicle reports entry interface. We are beginning to feel the atmosphere as we go in here. It is reporting that we are seeing Gs on the order of 11 to 12 Earth Gs. Bank reversal 2 is starting. We are now getting telemetry from Odyssey. We should have parachute deploy around Mach 1.7. The parachute is deployed. We are decelerating. Speed chill has separated. We're found the ground. We're down to 90 meters per second at an altitude of 6.5 kilometers descending. Standing by for batch shell separation. We are in powered flight. We're at an altitude of 1 kilometer descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane is started.
Signal to us, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
You got thumbnails.
So I'm going to talk to you I could just talk off of that video, and I think maybe you'll remember that, for your life in terms of what we're talking about here. So what does that make you think of in terms of programs and projects and the work that you do? This is where I need some of you to call it out. I want to have a discussion a little bit with you. It's all about the team. One of the mistakes I made early in my career, so I told you, I was appointed, I was directed. I had been working at NASA in 1983. I was doing leadership development competencies. I was doing consulting to our teams. I was what they called a life scientist in terms of helping individuals, teams, and leaders get better. I was loving life at Maryland at the Goddard Space Flight Center, and I got a call at the end of 1990 saying, we want you to come to Washington. Nobody really wants to go to Washington. The people who want to go to Washington probably shouldn't be wanting to go to Washington. It's a place of politicians and strategies, but that's where the money is, and that's where the agency's headquarters is. And they said, we want you to come here. We need to set up a program project management initiative. And basically say, I don't know anything about projects. I don't know anything about engineering. And I was young. I was in my late 20s. So you say things in your late 20s you never would say ever again. And I said to this person in Washington, I said, you people are dumber than everyone here says you are. I said, why would you ask someone, my background was organizational psychology, why would you ask someone who doesn't have any background in projects or engineering to start up an effort around program project management learning? And at the other end of the line, I heard silence, and then we kind of got off the phone. And next day, Dave Hornistay was the person. He called me again. He said, we've talked, we really want you. And I said, can you give me one reason? And he said, look, if we hire a project manager from NASA or an engineer, they're going to be good and they're going to know what they think works, and the rest of the community is going to, is not going to listen. They're not going to be told by someone what to do. That's the nature of projects and engineering at NASA. Right? It's very community oriented, but they don't want someone telling them. They said, you've spent your life up to this point, Ed, working on learning and development, managing change. You're going to have to work with the project community. You're going to have to listen to them, and you're going to have to be involved in helping them change. That's what we want. And I got totally stoned, so I said, that's what I should be comfortable doing. So with great fear, I basically got involved in heading up that initiative. And the starting point was a total focus on individuals, individual training, individual competencies, individual certification. We had really good training programs. And then we started having failures going to Mars on robotic missions. And we found out we weren't focusing on the team, because performance in a project all is around the team. How well do you work together? How do you communicate together? Do you recognize and applaud and reward each other? At the end of the day, the work you do is so difficult because of the changes, the challenges, the knowledge and the talent that's necessary that goes across all different borders. And it's about the team. And that video is about the team. Now, those people, they were nervous. At the end, they're loving each other. I know a lot of those folks. Some of those folks are my friend. They were fighting like cats and dogs for the previous 10 years with each other, because that's what project folks and engineers do. What else, when you think about that video, does it say about our profession and about the work you do? Collaboration. We were having a discussion last night. PMI sponsored a forum, and one of the senior leaders of one of the organizations saying the key issue nowadays is about collaboration. I totally agree with that. Collaboration, the nature of projects has been misdefined by us because people outside who don't know project management, and there are a lot of them, they think project management is only about the tools and the techniques. They think it's only about EVM and risk management and the planning approaches and the Gantt charts and the tools that we use. And those are the instruments that we use, and they're vital and they're important for us. But ultimately, it's about the fact that we have challenges that you can't do without a large community of talented people with very different backgrounds coming together to take it on. So oil and gas, pharmaceutical, aerospace, construction, these require a lot of different skills, and basically the essence of project success or failure is the ability to collaborate. Very complex, very difficult. Increasingly more and more the key skill. The Project Management Institute indicates leadership, or what's being called soft skills, are going to be one of the most critical aspects of the success because of the complexity of what we have. So collaboration and team. Anything else? I didn't hear the achievement. Yeah, it's about being clear. One of the great things about, one of the reasons why societies want project people is because they know where you are. It's like a sporting event. You know the score. So if you're winning, if you're doing well, you know, maybe you get recognized rewards or management's happy. If the score is saying things aren't good, you know, then there's the ability to respond to it. Really, it's disciplined leadership. I've said for decades, NASA doesn't need managers, they need project managers. We don't need people who just don't have the data, the information, understanding what's going on. All these things are going on there. Another thing that was interesting in that clip is there's name bars in front of each of those people that has their name and the different work they're doing. You have hundreds of different professions. You have accountants, business people looking at the numbers, you have scheduling, you have planners, you have risk folks, you have software engineers, go on and on and on. You have basically a different language of professions. And what the project team, what the project leader has to do is how do we collaborate? That's what this has been about from everything I've seen you folks collaborating. I think I was told you had over 30 people who voluntarily organized and planned this, right? That's what a project is that team and the community coming together. The world we're in, Joseph Stiglitz is a world-renowned economist. He says basically the difference of success and failure is the ability to take an idea and to execute it. That's project management. People who don't know basically say we're only executors. No, that's not right. It's you're taking the idea and you're figuring out often complex, challenging ways to be successful. Another story I'll share about to make the point about the importance of really what you're doing and the fact that you've created a space here to come together, to talk, to share. I would imagine, do you ever argue with each other? You seem very friendly, so I can't imagine hearing that. But yeah, one of the things that successful teams do is that they argue with each other. They argue. Every NASA policy, or just about every NASA policy that was ever there started because there was either a problem or usually because the practitioners, members from the project management community said we have a problem here, and the NASA community of practitioners put together their guidelines. Exactly the same in terms of the Project Management Institute. When these standards get set, it's not by a few people in a small room, it's by many, many practitioners, and then it gets sent out and we all complain about it and we all look to constantly. That's kind of the nature of it. Tale of Two Shuttles. Again, it's about the people. 2009, February 1st, I was based in Washington, D.C. That's where headquarters is. I know many of you think that it's in Houston. Only the people in Houston spread that myth. The folks in Houston are responsible for human exploration programs. We have 9 other centers. They also think they're headquarters. 2009, I get a call from the acting administrator at the time was Chris Scalise, good friend of mine. I worked for him in many positions. He said, Ed, I want you to come down to the Kennedy Space Center. Kennedy Space Center is in Cocoa Beach. Anybody ever been there to the Kennedy Space Center? Okay. Basically, it's kind of like here. It's warm, it's humid. It's not as attractive because it's been built up, so there's mostly sand around there. But same kind of environment. And we go down there, and he wants me to watch how the team is working. We're getting ready for a launch scheduled the next day. And typically when you have a decision like that at NASA for the shuttle, or really most launch missions, you'll have a couple of hundred people in the room. You have engineers from the different disciplines, you'll have safety folks, you have the project team, you'll have retirees, you'll have international partners who are there. It's basically a whole community that are there. And the day before, they're basically going through the final review of do we launch or do we delay. That early morning at 6 a.m., got together with the team, and engineering had indicated that they had a problem that they could not figure out. On the previous launch, which was successful, one of the flow valves did not operate correctly. There's redundancy. One of the reasons why NASA is so expensive is that there's redundancy. NASA pays a lot so failures don't happen on human missions. There are other missions we do that are agile, that are fast, where failure is okay, but not on human exploration at this point. So they have redundancy. The other three worked. It took off. It landed fine. And now you're at the decision point of what do you do? Do you launch or not? And the program team basically says, look, we launched successfully. Everything went well. We have the redundancy. It's true we don't know. Engineering doesn't know why it didn't function. But we recommend launching, right? Because every day that you don't launch, you're raising costs. Every day you're also increasing the risk in terms of the space station that's circling with humans that are waiting for supplies and all this kind of stuff. What do you think engineering says? Do you think they said launch? Engineers typically be the perfectionists, they're technology, so they basically, they're saying, we don't know why this happened, we say no launch. Safety agrees with engineering, no launch, and you have this discussion. Over the next 14 hours, this was one of the proudest days of my life, because I'd spent my career of how do we work together, how do we train people, how do we make sure. It was open communication, it was honest exchanges, there was the use of analytics and data, there was accessing technology. At the end of that 14 hours, there was agreement not to launch until we understood what had caused the problem. As an example of the effectiveness of that team, a young woman, mid-career, mid-30s, one of the discipline experts working for us, raised her hand. Bill Gerstenmaier was heading up the shuttle program at the time. He is one of the finest leaders of programs in the world. He now heads up human exploration for NASA. NASA is very lucky and fortunate to have him. The young woman says, Bill, I want to raise a question. She asks it. And everyone in that room, including me, and I'm a psychologist, recognizes that that question has nothing to do with the problem related to the shuttle. It has to do with something in her own discipline area. And I watch this to see how it's going to be handled. And what Bill says is, this doesn't seem to be directly related to the issue we're working with shuttle. Is that right? She says, yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the shuttle, but this has been something I'm trying to get to the leadership's attention for months. And we're all here, so I wanted to get that visibility. Now, in a lot of cases, people would have, you know what the reaction would have been. What Bill did is he turned to his associate and says, let's get that down because that's an important point, we have to work it. He said, but is it okay, do you agree that that's not something, impacting us now? Can we? And she said, yes. He says, okay, let's move on. That's what that day was about. And what that did was it gives permission to say, to participate, to say things that aren't right, to offer up ideas. Drove back that day feeling really good. And then as the brain works, my mind went to another event, another story. Almost exactly to the date 6 years earlier, catastrophic event, the Columbia failure. Columbia took off. It had debris that hit the wing. It actually stayed in space to do its mission, and on coming back on reentry, it blew apart. That is, if any of you have ever looked at the case study, that's one of the embarrassing, painful, disastrous points in NASA history. Fundamentally because we didn't work as a team. There were engineers who raised issues, said we need to check this more. They were shouted down by management. There was an engineer from safety, Rodney Roca. You can go online and you can check him. He talks about it. He still is impacted by the guilt of that day. He said he thinks there's a significant problem. We need to start looking at it, and we need to start making plans. He was shouted down. He was told to basically shut up. There are videos from other organizations that NASA said they didn't need to see the videos. So we turned down data. We didn't follow up on it. We didn't listen to our people. We had an embarrassing failure. So the question that I was thinking about as I went back to the hotel that night is, this is the same organization This is the same mission, the same program area, basically the same project management guidelines and policies, and most of the people in that room were the same. So how is it possible you can have such a different outcome? Any guesses? Any thoughts on this? This is a major issue, performance variability within the same team. What was that? Communication was a massive difference. One of the lessons, the first thing I want you to remember from what I'm talking about is it's always about the people. If you're ever confused about what to do, you have to respond to the people. I had one leader one time, he says, I don't trust my people. I don't think they're good enough. I told him then you got to get different people or you got to go, because if you don't trust your people, basically what's going on there. Communication is the other thing. Conversations. What you're doing here is so vital. And you're doing it on a Saturday. Very impressive. You're taking your time out from other things. You're sharing, you're coming together, maybe you're arguing. That's the essence of successful organizations and projects, and we forget about it all the time. I've had leaders who say they recognize communication, but they won't give their people an hour to come together and talk. They won't approve conference attendance or things like that. What else do you think leads to that difference between success and failure? 6 years, same people. The critical, well, both of them were critical, but yeah, in one case they accepted it as critical. And actually the case that was less critical was the one because of the leadership of Bill that was focused on. And in the other case, there was data there that evidently we did not want to see. And sometimes we're in projects where the customer, the client, the manager, someone doesn't want to see bad news. Right? I have students, I teach at Columbia University, I teach around, my students are technologists, they're analytics people, they're all, and I have some part of that community, they're data people. They believe if you have the data, it's going to solve everything. I got to tell you, I saw times on bad project teams where they had the data and they changed the data. NASA's initial estimate of the shuttle was that it was going to safely fly, I think, once every 57 times, which was accurate. Somehow then the data came out about a year later saying it's going to fly once every 500 times. No one ever knew how that came out, but it was changed. Again, it's the team, it's the communication, it's the integrity, it's all these kinds of issues, and that's what you're about here. But it's easy to forget those kinds of things. Performance variability typically comes at the human level. When NASA was successful, and overwhelmingly it was successful, it was because we had talented people. It was people who went through a life cycle of learning, and it didn't stop when they got to leadership, they kept. It's because they had respect for their partners. Anybody from Israel here? Okay, a few. I was here 8 years or 10 years ago. Space is an international endeavor. 80% of every NASA project is a partnership with international communities. We have an international community. I still stay in touch with NASA and the community. We do an international project management course, and we have folks from the European Space Agency and from Japan, from Argentina, and from Israel. We were visiting with Israel yesterday, the chair. He was very happy, obviously, in terms of the new launch vehicles. It's a participation. It's a collaboration. But again, these are the things, that's what accounts for variability. Let's go beyond. What are some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with? The role of project manager, the role of really people who are working is going to be dramatically changing. I think, how many of you agree with that? There's going to be dramatic changes to our roles. Okay, so there's agreement. So I think then the question is, how do we deal with it? One of the things to think about is how do we learn? And I'll keep coming back again, do things like this. Join your association, be a part of PMI, be a part of the community, and don't sit back. One thing is to be a member, the other thing is to really be active, to raise hard questions. When NASA did that, we were successful. It's an environment of constant learning. At this point, things are constantly in every kind of profession, in every kind of an organization. Our job is about ideas. People come to you with crazy ideas, things that can't be done by others, and they expect you to figure it out. Then when it runs a little bit over, or maybe a lot over, or over schedule, people say, how come you can do that? But that's the nature of programs and projects. Data and research says people love the notion of programs and projects, doing it. My students at Columbia, they are project people. And what they like about it is they think they're challenging, it's complex, it's hard to do, it's people, it's international. and they like that. And it's about taking hard things, hard ideas, and making them real. So when people tell me, isn't project management, isn't it just tools and techniques? Isn't it about delivery and execution? Yeah, it's about delivery and execution. It's also about everything else that came before that and that comes after that. That video, where do you think that is in the mission in a project? Is it at the end of the project? People who typically see that say that's the end. That's actually probably midway through. If that system doesn't collect the data, if it gets on the system, the optics don't work, then you have something called Hubble 1. And most of you are too young to remember that. When Hubble first was released, it got launched in space, it was fine. The optics didn't work. It was a massive embarrassment to NASA. NASA went up there to repair it. So missions go through long periods of time. It's about the ideas. It's about the innovations. It's about the adaptability. It's about being able to do things that aren't done. Artificial intelligence is a shorthand, I would say, for technology. Technology is disruptive. It's changing everything. I'm being called by technology right now, right? It's participating in the discussion. That's a given. I sometimes get people say, what's more important, technology or people? You don't have to make that decision. Projects are a profession of both and. We have to integrate all these different challenging things. It's not basically saying, I'm going to do this, you know, as opposed to that. Sometimes, really, but I'll still sometimes see managers who say, I only have limited resources, so I'm going to focus on the technology. I'll get to the people later. I've seen other people say, I'm just going to focus on developing my people, and it's an integrated thing. Artificial intelligence is going to change the nature of our work in terms of making things faster. If you're in financials, it'll probably be doing more things. It'll be assisting people, human machine. This is where things going, a whole nother area of learning. And the key thing also is, how do we take care of our people? People again. The one competitive advantage of any organization is people. Some of you will say technology. Technology is a changer, it's a disruptor, it's going to constantly be changing, but the reality is, once you develop your advantage in technology, what's going to happen? Someone else is going to take it, they're going to steal it, they're going to use it in a different way, and they're going to be in the lead. That's the whole nature of the environment right now, being close to Bangalore, you know about that. Basically, there's a constant hunt and a search for the new thing. Once you get the new thing, 2 months later, someone's getting ready to unleash a totally new thing. Technology is vital, it's critical, it's not going to be a competitive advantage. The only competitive advantage you have is if you're working in a team or collaborating in an organization with really smart people who are passionate, who care, who want to do the best, who are going to make it happen. Like the volunteers you had here, you know, it's not, you probably weren't asking for money, you weren't asking for management direction, you weren't waiting for a political leader to tell you something, you made something special happen, right? That's what is success, and that's what the best organizations do to make it happen. One of the challenges we have is we're in a different age. We're in the greatest transformation in terms of how work's done than ever in the history of society. And yet many of our systems, our measurement systems, our structures, how we manage, how we select people is being done for work that was done 50 years ago. Examples, and I've heard this all the time. I'll go to an organization and someone will say, our organization is saying we need to be agile. I say, well, that's good. Agile is adaptive, it's fast, it's giving more decisions. Yeah, but they don't really believe it. I said, what do you mean they don't believe it? I said, every time we try to be agile, I try to be adaptive, I'm told to slow down, or we have this methodology that makes things harder. And it's true, because we're still dealing with heritage of how we like to do things in a time of rapid change. And the way we have to deal with it is we got to be working together, and you have to be raising those issues, and you have to smartly be saying, how do we want to do this? Example of 15 years ago, or actually 20 years ago, I was in a room teaching NASA folks. It was one of our residential training systems. NASA just released a new policy guideline. The folks there said it limited their ability to be successful. They started getting angry, they started arguing, I said, don't worry, we got the NASA leadership, the administrator. The deputy administrator came down 2 nights later, and we gave a presentation. And he said, fine, improve it. He said, I'm going to set up a Tiger team, and you're going to present to us in a month, present to the leadership. They did, and that changed the policy. That was constantly done. That's what voluntary groups, so that's what people going above and beyond. Our systems need changing, but we have to have the right people. We have to have the leaders. We have to have the professionals defining things and not people who do not know as well. This is just kind of a graphic chart, but it's one of the most important things I'll share with you. That's not being talked about, but I think is going to be one of the biggest things over the next decade. The work that's being done increasingly, particularly by economists, say the great differentiator in organizations is in what they're calling the intangible goods. What they've said is that of the top 500 S&P organizations, what gives them the greatest value, the greatest wealth, 80% of it is intangibles. What's an intangible when it comes to work? Knowledge. Knowledge is a major intangible. Talk to that quickly. What else is intangible? Skill set, yeah, you can measure that. How we learn, certainly. You're coming here believing that something makes sense. You may go back to the office or someplace on Monday and said, what did you learn? I said, oh, that was great. We heard from this guy from NASA. We had good things. We did all that stuff. And you may have someone saying, well, how do you know that you learned anything? It's going to be hard to measure that. Learning is hard to do. Trust. Trust is very vital. How do you measure that? Collaboration is very vital. So I'll get some managers saying, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. I ask them, are you married? I'll ask them, why did you get married? And occasionally, not always, they'll say, for love. And I'll say, how did you measure the love? Did you have a metric that came out that when you met the right person, it basically came out with the right equation? And this is now. The most important things in terms of humans have been the intangibles. Now in work, it drives that. It's how quickly can you adapt. It's issues around agility. It's effectiveness in teams. It's how do we communicate. How does learning take place? Do you have an environment where you respect each other? Do you reward each other? The things that I've been seeing here that you've been starting to do, those things are intangible. Very hard to put together a number. Increasingly, work is going to be around the intangibles. I do most of my work now for PMI with the Global Executive Council organizations. These are some of the largest organizations around. There's folks in the room here. When I speak to the leaders, these are the things that they see as the biggest challenges that they worry about. Disruptive change, the speed of it, global competition, the importance of having talent. All these are factors that we've been talking about. Right? It's a profession. It's hard work. It's not pushing a button. It's not just tools and technologies. It's the issue of how do we take hard ideas and make them reality. That's the whole aspect of how things are taking place. Software is an ultimate enabler of knowledge. It's embedded knowledge. It has changed how things are used. Twitter, social media has changed the game. Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX. One of his customers who bought a Tesla car did a tweet complaining about the idiots, quote unquote, who leave their cars charging beyond the 3 hours that they need, and then he couldn't find a space open. Elon saw it. He says, you're absolutely right, and we're going to do something about it. The instant nature of communications technology, total game changer. But notice that the technology is being used for people to interact with people. The other thing that Elon did, because he's a capitalist, is basically he started charging, so if you keep your car beyond 3 hours, you start paying a levy. So now he's being a good support for this person, but he's also making money. So there's all these things going on. It's a different world. Let me talk about a few things, a few points I want to make, and perhaps there's time for questions. What are we talking about the intangible of knowledge, the place we work? One of the things, please remember, is knowledge is profoundly social. It's exactly about what you're doing here. It's coming together. What is it that makes a team successful? It's having a space to be able to come together and talk and argue without pressure. That is what effective leaders do. It's inherently participative. So when you're part of the PMI chapter, when you're part of your organization, when you're part of a working group, don't just sit there, offer your views, offer your ideas, because the people who are doing the talking, if they don't know what they're talking about, they may be unintentionally taking us in the wrong direction. So I always tell to my leadership, I work at Columbia University, I tell my dean, if I'm at a meeting, you may not want me there because I'm going to let you know what I think. So sometimes they don't get invited to some of the meetings that He doesn't want my opinion. It's about experience, right? If you graduate from school with an engineering degree, right out of school, you consider that person a professional engineer. If someone graduates from physics, do you consider them a aerospace physicist? Typically, it's the combination of the education with experience, with doing. What's the best way that you learn, right? If I read you just charts, if I gave you a book, would you feel that you learn things? You learn by doing, by touching, by being involved in things. The other thing about knowledge is it's dynamic, it changes. And our environment is rapidly changing. That means the skills we have today as a project manager are going to change. You're going to come up with a new ideas PMI chapter, and you're going to feel good about it. And even before you release it, people are going to be saying, we need to change. That is just the nature of the environment because we're in a knowledge-intensive environment, social technology decisions, rapid change, and these are the issues that we're starting to deal with. A couple of things in terms of how to deal with that. One, look at culture. Are you selecting the right people to be leaders and managers? Is there trust in the organization? Is there trust in the chapter where you can talk about successes, where you can talk about failures? Do people step up? Is there accountability? Is there a commitment to how we develop our teams? Are people engaged? I spent a lot of my time focused on are people learning fast, and are they engaged? Engagement means that they're participating, they're talking. There's an energy. When I ask a question with you, there's different people responding to things, right? There are other groups that don't say anything. And there's a sense of community, there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of there's something special that is taking place. At NASA, Chief Knowledge Officer, these are the 30 things that I looked for on a large level, and we tailored specific activities to it. One is, can we discover the important ideas? Can we discover the problems before they go on too long, or is it being held back? Are we able to discover the innovation so we can innovate across the whole organization as opposed to part of it? You have an environment where we have very talented people who don't talk to each other because they compete or because they're afraid? Or do you have an environment with very talented people who share and who extend the ideas and where we can find solutions? And is all this integrated into the total system? So are you hiring the people who are really bringing these ideas and the expertise? Are we focusing our attention on developing teams? Are we giving time to come to the PMI chapter when people are asking to go to training? Is there support for that? We've met with many organizations here. I'm very happy to see that most of them have project academies, learning functions. They put a lot of resources. That's what this is about. When I see that, that means things are going well. What works against it? Be careful of people being overloaded. One of the things we had a tendency at NASA is we gave too many requirements. We have to prioritize. We have to focus in people. As the Chief Knowledge Officer, when I talked to my team across all of NASA, I promised them I would never give them more than 3 agency requirements or initiatives during the course of the year. It's just too much, right? So overcapacity. Are we telling people why things are changing? Are we using stories to understand why we need to adapt? A lot of people are wondering about, agile, not agile, where are we going? It's not just giving a direction, it's explaining what's happening and why we think something makes sense. Space we've been talking about, this is space, not that space. Space for people to come together to have time, right? I think over here, I know in Japan, there's tea breaks and people get together and they talk. Very important to have a space, conferences, forums. Knowledge is not a machine, it's a relationship, and it's people having time to come together. Right? And cognitive diversity, do we have people we're listening to who have different ideas? If we're only talking to people who think exactly the same way, that's where we get into trouble. Got a minute, so go into a final couple of things. We know what leads to success. Now the PMI data is there. How many of you read and look through the pulse of the profession? No, not good. So that's one of the tasks I'd give you. The pulse of the profession has really great stuff there. I give it to my students, I give it to the folks. It's done research on knowledge management in projects, it's done stuff on agility in projects, it's looking right now at disruptive technologies, it's easy to read, it's fast. We got to stay on top of things because things are changing so quickly. But we know what leads to success. It's not a surprise. Fundamentally in a project, you have a sponsor, a leader, a client who is supportive of what they're bringing you on to do. This sounds straightforward, but there were a couple of times in my career at NASA where I basically turned down projects because I saw no support for that. Very important sign. Are we able to scope the project? And is there value? Is there belief in what we're doing? I'd ask project folks working on a team, how many of you feel so passionate about what they're doing that you're willing to go to your children's school and talk about it? If I got people who didn't feel that way, I would say, why aren't you thinking about joining another project that you feel passionate about? Our work is so hard, it's so difficult, there's so many challenges. To me, if you don't really love it, if you don't feel a sense of we're doing something special, it's going to be hard to get through that. Pulse of the profession. There's going to be different delivery methods, predictive, agile. There's new things being cooked up now. You're good, you're going to adapt to it. It's not something to worry about, it's something of what helps us be successful. Focus time and get young professionals. I think I was hearing there's a young community here who's a part of some of this thing. That's really vital. I worked with the young professionals at NASA. It's about learning, it's about new capabilities, it's about being careful of core capabilities that lock us in. It's about how do we keep going, where are we going tomorrow? And again, you're in India, so you're focused on a lot of these changes. So you should be ahead of the game in terms of learning and supporting that. And making sure that the organization respects what a project professional is. Whenever I hear an organization talk or a manager talking about a project person as just an executor, I start going crazy. I'm basically a nice person, but after all these years, project folks have launched things to different planets. They've created robotics. They're involved in healthcare, every kind of work. And it's about the idea, the difficulty of the idea, the political support for it, the pulling together the team, the dealing with the technology. Our projects often go over many years, if not decades, and it's executing successfully. It's not just execution. It's a key component. It's the whole thing. We have to take our profession seriously. These are some of the factors of agility. Are we focusing on change, risk management, teams, dealing with silos? It's about the people. You have this data, so I won't go through this in the stance of time. Are we taking care of, are we listening to people? The number one thing that made me happy when I would go to every center as Chief Knowledge Officer, I said, what can you tell me you feel good about? And I consistently at the end got people saying, tell the leadership we appreciate the fact that they listen to us and they come to us at events like this. That, to me, was music to my ears, right? The other things you can deal with. It's also important to look at the processes we've had. There was process changes after the Columbia failure that I won't go into. But is the structure supporting the things we need to do? Is the project policy guidelines we have helping us? Are they neutral or are they working against us? And we have to take time to work on those and get the right people. At NASA, we had a talent direction in terms of from the strategy, focused on competencies, commitment to career development, and a focus on our young professionals. I've gone through this fast because I want to show one more video clip. At the end of the day, how are you successful? Develop ourselves. It's about capability in our field. It's about having an attitude of wanting to do. You got to love what you do. You're a project person. It's probably one of the most important professionals on the planet. People are always looking for us. We've got to remember that. It's about getting new assignments. It's doing hands-on activities. It's about our network. What you're doing right here is vital. It's about the network. There's one skill that's often not talked about in terms of project professionalism is, do we have a network? The most effective NASA project managers and systems engineers, one of the key findings was that they had a broad network. They were not necessarily the smartest people. From the standpoint of smarts, meaning that I can do it on my own. At NASA, if you think you can do it on your own, we will not select you because we will have a failure. It's about the network. It's about the community. Let me go into the final thing. It's a project world. Everything we do is a project. I'm going to show you kind of a cool video. It's actual footage of the International Space Station circling Earth. As you watch this, I'd like you to think about what is it that you do in terms of your work that impacts things like that. It's a project world. So if we hit this, this will be closing presentation. So we started with a video that I hope you always think about. It's if nothing else, it's about the people. Take care of them, develop them. If you're not working with people that you trust or you believe in, then you got to find a different group because it won't work. It's about the people. And the closing thing, it's all about projects. All the capabilities that are in this room are the things that do things like that. And we got to remember that. We got to fine-tune it. We keep having to get better. And from everything I've seen here, this is what you're doing. So, really it's an honor to present to you. I want to thank Jacob and Managing Director Raj, who was here, I think, earlier, because they're the ones, and thank them, they're the ones who arranged it for me to be here, and for your chapter. Very, very impressive what you're doing. It's doing all the right things, and I congratulate you. I'm glad to be here. I still hope we stay connected. So, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that mind-blowing video, we come to the end of that wonderful session. Give it up once again for Dr. Ed Hoffman.
Thank you.
Dr. Hoffman, thanks for reminding us that project management is not rocket science, but even rocket science can fail without sound project management principles. And while we were talking about pursuing technology and becoming technologists, while we evolve project management, Doctor, you reminded us to focus on the core principles of people and relationships, which forms the basis of effective project management. Thank you very much for your session.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Dr. Krishna Kumar, President, PMI Kerala Chapter. Dr. Hoffman, can you please be on the stage? Dr. Krishna Kumar, to hand over the memento to Dr. Hoffman.
Wow, you knew about my presentation. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. Wow. Right, yeah. Got to be rowing in the right direction. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.